we often say that what's at the core of our actions is money. Who pays, but what do we pay for? What do we fund? And we'll have a new discussion and we'll talk about what it means to invest funds to adapt to climate change. And we have to have different approaches to the very same topic. Research, support to regions, technical support. And thanks to these various points of view, I would like to pay tribute to the work of the scientific committee as headed by Mrs. Masson, and all these people of the scientific committee are in charge of this, and I have discussions with them before this seminar. It's amazing. The points of view are perfect, so we can get a clear picture of these very complex topics, and it shows that everything is connected. We are all facing the same challenges. We need to be able to fund these actions, even though they are essential. So I will call Anne Épaulard to join me. She is the director of the Economics and Environment Department at OFCE, and you also led a study on the cost of decarbonization in Paris. You can sit anywhere you want. Laurence, you're the head of the engineering department at the Banque de Territoires. Give her a round of applause and support the regions with adaptation plans. Blaise Bourgeois, you are director of reinsuring of natural disasters at Generali. Give him a round of applause. And finally, Florence URCHETTI, delegate for the good transition in the territories for ENEDIS Paris.
So I have a little habit. So little game is a conversation with one small easy questions to ask. So it's a short question leading to a short answers. We want a short answer, yes. So this is also a question to you and online as well. So the question is the following one: when a community talks to you about cost, what word would you like them to use instead? What could we turn into? An épaulard, so I would like to add the word benefits. There are costs and benefits. Thank you, Anne. What would you change? What would you replace it with? I would talk about investment for the future. Blaise Bourgeois, to go to knowledge in an approach of a PPP approach, so public and private partnership. And Florence, maybe common projects, because I am convinced that when we have common projects, we can find solutions. You have quite a lot to replace the word cost. So thank you very much for this little game. An épaulard. We will first have a first round. Anne Épaulard, you have led a study for the city of Paris on the cost of decarbonization. What are the main lessons learned that you've had from this study? So first of all, we called it Decarbonate Paris, Cost and Benefits. This is why benefits are really important. And synthèse du rapport dans un policy brief qui s'appelle Décarboner Paris, coûts et bénéfices. Là, c'est la version courte. Vous pouvez aller voir aussi le rapport dans son ensemble qui représente la version longue. Alors, ça coûte cher. Okay. Alors, combien ça coûte? Eh bien, d'après nos chiffres, donc on regarde que la décarbonation. On n'a pas chiffré le coût de l'adaptation.
Let's focus on decarbonization. We don't have an estimate for the adaptation costs, and for all the Parisians, and not only for the city of Paris. For the households in Paris, the government and the Paris municipality, etc. So it costs approximately until 2030 2 billion euros per year, and it will go down to 1.5 billion per year. So what does it mean? It's the additional cost that we'll have to invest compared to what we already spent on a yearly basis. And based on this, in 2015 in Paris, we in Scope 1 and Scope 2, and we'll probably reach the Zen target, which is the zero CO2 emissions. I would like this name of Zen target. Great. Okay, while we were preparing this seminar, you talked about this risk of having hitchhikers. What do we mean by hitchhikers? We need to spend money. I didn't make a good distribution of the cost. We didn't divide the cost by who will pay what and how, just the total of the additional costs. And we also try to see how much we will pay for heating, for air conditioning, etc. But we also listed the joint benefits. For example, if we spend less on heating, on gas, so we have a clearer air, we have fewer traffic jams, and we will all benefit in our health and health expenditures. Obviously, we'll gain more because I'm one individual. If I'm fully rational, I will let people do the job, and I'll enjoy the fresh air without doing anything at all for my own apartment. We don't want to have hitchhikers, and we don't want people to live in an area with fresh air without wanting to pay anything at all for this. Okay, great. We'll get back to this and talk about the interdependence of all these factors. We have to rethink the economic factors. Laurence, you're in charge of supporting the local authorities and cities. What are the factors leading to a project included in a sustainable and fundable strategy? So, for example, the Caisse of Dépôts is a long-term investor, up to 90 years. The idea that we have some failed assets of long obsolescence. So we can see that what the problem is, and we know that we have debt that is not based on anything at all, on failed assets. And so we have intrinsic values. Once this is said, if we want to work on the resilience of a specific asset against climate change, etc. So as was said previously, I won't be very original. First of all is to think about the vulnerabilities of a specific region, the exposure, and how we can reduce the risks, how we can be cautious while choosing the projects we've found. How can we assess the vulnerabilities? As previously said, we understand that vulnerabilities are not yesterday's data and not tomorrow's data, and the indicators are not the indicators of the past or the indicators of the future. So how can we envision a France with +4 degrees, and we can see what would be the exposure of individuals and companies and assets. So based on this assessment, we can support these projects. How can we target specific investments? How can we configure these investments? How can we have adaptation measures included in these projects? And once we have assessed thoroughly, we can consider that we used money wisely because we invested in resilient assets and resilient areas, which bring solutions to the regions. So the idea is not a hitchhiker, it's not having remorse. You used several times that we need to talk to this local authority. What do we mean by acting without remorse? Then we have new tools for local authorities. For example, as developed by the the Climate Economic Authority. So they have pluriannual plans, and local authorities can include their climate change and adaptation measures in their action plans. So once they need funds, they can actually require funds and subsidies, and they can also have more debts. If you have a short-term investment that don't increase the resilience of your authority, and you have costs that may have an impact on the good functioning of this local authority. If you invest on the long term, on several years in a row, you can be more resilient and you can increase the attractiveness of your region. And now we talked about the concept of livability, but we cannot be attractive if you're not livable. So what are the necessary investments to bring a new impetus in what we do? And this is why we want to talk about investment. And this investment is long-term investment. So what do we want to do this without remorse? Because if we keep on talking about the year 2100, we consider it a far remote future. It really creates stress, and we can have short-term, mid-term, and long-term actions, and they are very diverse. We don't have the same way of investing money, and this is why we don't want to have remorse. I won't give you too many examples because it depends a lot on which region, and the investment plans are very different. But I just give you one example. We support coastal regions, and the recurring question when we have the debates with coastal regions, do I protect or do I relocate? Well, there's not a single solution. Maybe we can actually relocate a few buildings, a few villages, or maybe I can adapt these other villages. And we need 30 years to adapt.
In this landscape, we have a very structuring role. It's the insurer, because he foresees the risk, because he does plan them. So, Blaise Bourgeois, this is what you have at Generali. So, as insurer, an investor, how do you see the role as of a company like Generali in responding to climate change? In this response, at least, or this war. So we think it's a structuring role, and it's very important to us as insurer with our customers and distributors. We are in the front row, and the facts are here. So the numbers that have been said this morning is plus 1.6 degrees globally in comparison to the pre-industrial era, and it's the double at European level. So we see, and it's been said that there is this spread. So this means that an insurer is here to fund hazards, to fix and to give indemnities, and this is 2 billion for France between 1990 and 2010, and it's doubled since 2010-2020, and this is accelerating, and we have projections that are even more alarming. So this says that we have a default here at protection level. It's 310 billion at global level, and we see that very often it's the poorest countries and the most vulnerable populations who are the less insured. So we need to fix this insurance gap. At Generali, we have decided to act in 3 chapters. First, to measure and to understand these climate hazards, and it's to alert and prevent, to do prevention. And as insurer, in the commitment we bring to our liabilities, we need to look look at the investments we can make to turn this and to help decarbonate and facilitate this transition. So on measures and understanding, we have a climate lab for 10 years since the Paris Agreement. It's an expert pool, pluridisciplinary climatologists with data scientists, etc., helping us to progress in our mapping of risks and helping us to be ahead in anticipating tomorrow's risks for the future. And we see that the past is not the best way to predict the future. So from there, we guarantee the pooling of risks, which is the condition, the first condition for insurance. And we believe in research. So this is why we have launched partnerships, especially with the city of Paris, with this amazing consortium, Copernicus, at European level, that is based on data in European and the research lab on science and climate. And these ecosystems brings a lot for us to Generali, and it's a real lab measuring things, helping us to measure things at Paris level and European level. And we also do that to enlarge the scope of climate change beyond individuals and property, but also on health, which is why we have made new partnerships with the Mont d'Or Health Institute to study this phenomenon. So as stakeholders, we also believe in prevention. It's the condition for insurability. It means that each individual, each company is aware of their own risks. So we have tools available for free called EFAR. It's an online platform, a free one, easy to access, and this can be accessed by many people, and we also have dedicated advice through our networks, thanks to the climate fresk, and all of our distribution networks have been trained, and they have very detailed fact sheets adapting to local realities. And I think it's very important to have this local anchoring, because everyone has their own specificities. And as an insurer, we warn customers when there are hazards, and we've seen this in Paris. We've sent 4 billion SMS to our customers, and we insure and guarantee help in reconstruction, rebuilding afterwards. So we are engineers of resilience and of individuals, of companies. We do it through our commitments with our liabilities, our products. For example, we don't invest in mines and coal anymore. We invest on photovoltaic panels. It's a product innovation. We also invest in wood construction and with factors that can lead to positive behaviors, so reuse such schemes. So we have very concrete examples and daily examples to offer such products. And I'm sorry, I'm being a bit long, but we also do it through our investment. We have a balance of 100 billion euros, and it is so much capital that we can use and put to profit to mitigate, to decarbonate, and to fund this ecosystem that is emerging around ecological transition. Thank you, Blaise Bourgeois. We will see it with you, Florence, later on. Some equipments are not adapted anymore to climate change, so costs will increase, and there is tension on reinsurance as well, Blaise Bourgeois. So when we talked before, you talked about the limitations of the CatNat system. It's quite technical, so how can we maintain a sustainable system? As I said, we cannot be the only ones as insurers with our customers on their side, and to bear these inflationist costs. in our tools. So what we think is that we don't want to reach a situation in Florida, such as Florida, and in California, where insurers do stop insuring customers. So we want to help our customers with prevention, and this is first on individual level. At a micro level, each individual behavior means that we can become our own actors in resilience, and also having co-construction systems with the insurer to facilitate this adaptation. This is why the CatNat system that we are very fond of in France, built in 1982, we must make it more sustainable, which is why we have seen a surplus in investment in CatNat. In 2025, we will see if it continues, because it's a pooling system on some natural hazards, so it does not cover all of the risks. It's on clay shrinking and swelling, it's on coastal erosion and on landslides, but it does not cover hurricanes, for example. Thank you very much for this technical point. So in critical infrastructures, we have networks. Florence, here at ENEDIS Paris, you work on the everyday, on a daily basis on concrete adaptation. If we take the example here in Paris of the electricity network, it's dense, it's ancient, old, and we constantly need to adapt it. How do you do it? And how does this affect the way you approach your investments? Thank you for this question. So first of all, I want to say a word on ENEDIS. It's the manager of the electricity public network, and we want to work in a concessive approach. So municipalities are owners of cables, etc., and local authorities do give authorization to ENEDIS to work on this network. There is 41,000 of us in 25 regional departments, and I think it's our strength is to be the closest possible of local authorities, to be really anchored in the territory. So in Paris, we are 1,200 directly involved with the city. You talked about the Parisian network. It is dense, it's true, it's old, it's true as well. It's exposed to risks, but not necessarily more than in other regions, because it is under the ground. So it is preserved from hurricanes, for example, in comparison to Brittany, for example. However, it is exposed to two major risks, which are heat waves and floods. When it's very warm for a few days and that temperatures don't go down in summer, the ground gets warmer, and electrical systems installed when there were no heat waves are overheating, and then they stop working. Parisians are faced with shortage, with electricity shortage, and we need to fix this. And the other risk is floods, because these electrical panels are in the arrondissement that are faced with flooding risk, and we must protect them. So each year we invest over 140 million euros to make the network more modern, more resilient to climate change. We target really specifically the flood risks and heat wave risks. So thank you, Florence. Concretely, how do you work with the municipality, the city of Paris, to make adaptation? It's a partnership approach. I was talking about investment dedicated to modernizing the network, and we have an obvious interest here with the city of Paris, and we also have additional actions. We we have made a convention on ecological transition dedicated to identify actions that the City of Paris want to meet for climate change and cities plan, and to use ENEDIS competencies and skills. So we have here a common interest, and these are actions that we fund or co-fund because they allow us to put forward our skills and competencies. So the Mayor Anne Hidalgo was talking about how important it is to have numbers to show the efficiency of actions. So we do contribute to that. For example, we create data observatory showing the evolution of the consumption of data, of energy production in Paris, of electricity uses, of poverty as well, and these are all information that are, I think, important for the city to allow, first of all, to measure the efficiency of the actions that they are doing and to prioritize actions that need to be taken in the future. Thank you. I want to bounce back on this last question on how you work with local authorities in a very concrete manner. For example, the city of Paris, yes, there is many people. We have engineers, we have experts. We know that they know how to work efficiency with organizations. They know how to translate data. But how about small local authorities? How do you support them? How do you help them on the field to translate this data? Because it's very important work in the long run, so they must be strong enough to translate that into action. So how do you support them on a daily basis? So I'm not sure that I can answer. This is the first experiment with the City of Paris for decarbonation. So we have worked a lot with technical services, with elected representatives from all different parties, and we needed their knowledge and their skills to translate all of this into numbers. So we've learned a lot on the Parisian experience. If you ask me to do this the same with a smaller city, I don't know if I could do it, but I would still need specific data and information linked to the city and the territories. So I think even the smallest cities must develop skills and spend money or have human resources to these topics, because without the help of the city, we could not do anything. Our research was the result of a really good partnership. The city has a role of a third party of trust. You were telling me before that energy renovation, especially in co-properties, could be very difficult. There was not this external help. So Paris is trying to do that. So thermal renovation of building costs a lot. It's a lot of money, and I think in all the cities with a strong cultural heritage, it's going to cost a lot of money. So if we only talk about properties, it's not profitable, not at all. And above all, most properties are co-properties, so it's more efficient to renovate a building as a whole rather than one apartment within a whole block. So it needs to be done as a co-property. So it means that everyone needs to agree, or at least the majority. And even though people agree, they also need to be able to fund it. So once we have all of this, we need as well that this co-property, often it's a small one. I live, for example, in a place with 8 co-owners. None of us have the technical competencies to talk to the technical experts. So I think the City of Paris has a program called My Coach, My coach propos to help co-properties to have more information so that they share knowledge on these matters. So beyond the economic part, there is a lack of knowledge and discussion with the technical experts of the thermal renovation of the building. I did not know anything about this scheme, and now I'm an ambassador for this scheme. This is how it works, actually. So Laurence, on this question of support.
Alors, nous, à la Caisse des dépôts, on a un réseau de directions
At
régionales
the
qui
Caisse des
sont
Dépôts, we have a regional
sur le terrain, au
network
plus près des décideurs
and
territoriaux. Donc,
who are on
effectivement,
the
s'ils
field
connaissent,
with
c'est pas comme
local
notre réseau
authorities,
de
decision
conseillers,
makers.
mais
It's
en
not
tout cas, c'est eux qui dialoguent au
like your
quotidien avec
advisors
les acteurs
network, but they
territoriaux.
are here to talk
Euh,
every day with the local
Alors,
actors.
je salue en même temps des opérateurs de l'État. Nous ne sommes pas
I
un opérateur
want
de l'État, mais très
to
impliqués dans les
say
politiques
that
publiques
some
nationales en tant
stakeholders of the
qu'établissement
state are
public financier
really
sous surveillance du
involved
Parlement.
in
Et
public
donc, aux côtés de la mission
infrastructures.
adaptation qui est copilotée
So
par l'ADEME et le CEREMA.
on the adaptation mission
En dehors,
co-piloted by Adam and
nous avons
Serema,
décidé, ça a été voté par
we have
nos
decided,
instances
and it's been
au plus
voted
haut,
by
des
our
enveloppes d'ingénierie
highest
pour
instances.
cofinancer
We have
des études
engineering
d'accompagnement, de
envelopes
conseil
to
aux collectivités,
co-fund
justement considérant que
research
les enjeux
studies,
de
taking
transformation
into
des
account
territoires dont
the
on
fact
parle et auxquels
that
sont confrontés les
territories
décideurs territoriaux sont
transformation
de portée inconnue,
challenges
rendent
are
extrêmement
quite
complexe la décision.
unknown, and
Et en
it's
même temps,
making
on ne
decisions
dispose pas
very
toujours
hard to make, and we do not
l'ingénierie, de
always have
l'expertise
the engineering and the
dans
expertise
leurs équipes.
necessary in
Donc,
the
on a débloqué
teams.
des fonds. Donc,
So we
subvention,
have
même si je préfère parler de
authorized some
financement
funds.
d'accompagnement
These are
comme
grants.
prérequis à l'engagement de toute
I like
façon
to
à toute
say they're
décision
accompanying
d'investissement. Donc ça peut
financing,
passer soit par ceux qui sont
so it's support
extrêmement peu
funding, so
équipés
it can be
par
for those who are
programmes
not
qu'on
equipped
pilote
at all,
en intégralité, de façon à leur donner des points de méthodologie, des comparaisons,
to
des
give them
inspirations. Ça peut être
methodologies,
aussi des
inspirations,
sujets plus lourds qui engagent la
and when
responsabilité
we
et
are
choix
on heavier topics,
intrinsèque effectivement à chaque décideur, on va plutôt être en cofinancement.
then we are
On n'est pas
co-funding.
sur du guichet, c'est décider, négocier avec chaque direction
So this is
régionale.
all decided and managed by
Et
each
on voit qu'un
regional
des sujets,
direction.
c'est
And we
d'être
see
clair sur
that
la
one of the
qualification du
important topics
besoin.
is
De
to
quoi
be very
parle-t-on
clear
vraiment?
on what is the
Quel est
need,
le
what are
réel
we
besoin?
talking
Quelle est
about,
l'intentionnalité
what is the
derrière l'étude
real
qu'on veut faire? Elle va nous servir à quoi?
intention behind the
Voilà.
study that
Il y a
we're
tout
going
ce
to
travail
make, what is it
pédagogique
going
et
to
de
be
moyens
used for.
financiers
So
qui
there's
sont
this
importants.
whole
Pour certains territoires qui sont
awareness
particulièrement
raising
exposés, on va
aspect
même
that is
jusqu'à
very important. For
cofinancer des
some
chefs de projet,
territories that are
puisqu'on
very
peut faire des
exposed,
études,
we also
mais l'équipage
co-fund
de la maîtrise d'ouvrage est un élément absolu,
project heads.
puisque le principe, mais tout le monde va être d'accord, c'est que les études qui finissent dans les tiroirs, on n'aime pas, n'empêche qu'il y en a
We
quand même
don't want
beaucoup.
to have studies that are not used, and I think there are
Donc
too many of
voilà,
them
nos
already.
équipes des directions régionales
So
aiment bien parler
our
aux décideurs
teams
que c'est
at
bien eux
regional
qui doivent
level
donner
like
de
to
là.
talk to
Effectivement, dans des organisations de collectivités qui sont toutes
decision
différentes,
makers, and
et on est tous
in
confrontés
local
à ça,
authorities
c'est
organizations that are
sortir de
always
l'effet silo
different.
et faire en sorte que l'information circule
We
à
need
l'intérieur même
to
des
move
services.
away from the
Et
silo
puis,
effect and
donc
make
ça
sure
c'est
that
sur
the information
l'accompagnement, mais je me
circulates
permets
everywhere.
de
And
mettre
so
dire
this
un
is
mot
on
sur le
the
financement. Nous avons trois
accompanying
modalités
side,
de
but I want to
financement
say a word
principales,
on
sans rentrer dans les
funding. We
détails.
have
Nous
three
sommes investisseurs
modalities for
effectivement en fonds propres
funding.
dans les projets.
We are
Donc nous
investors
intégrons
on
de plus
our
en plus la
own
question du
capital,
risque climatique,
and we
pas
integrate
que sous l'angle de la
more and more
décarbonation.
climate risks in
La
our
décarbonation ne
practices,
résout
not
pas le
only
problème
for
de l'adaptation,
decarbonation,
et je
because
voulais le souligner.
decarbonization does
On
not
peut
solve
avoir une
the
infrastructure
problem of
extrêmement
adaptation. We
décarbonée,
can
mais
have
qui est
a very
complètement
decarbonated
d'immersion
infrastructures,
marine.
but
Et
that is in
donc,
a marine
je
submersion
nous
area,
oppose
for
pas, et
example.
ça a été dit ce
And
matin,
I do not
l'enjeu il est bien
oppose
de
them,
regarder ensemble ces sujets-là.
but the challenge is to
Oui,
take all
enfin,
of this as a
approche
whole.
opérationnelle, j'aime bien aussi.
I like the word operational approach. And the second topic, modality, is loan. One of our big funding resource is to loan, so we can use the saving accounts of French people to work on this. These are negotiated with the public treasure on longer modalities because it's very specific modality. And a third tool that we don't mention very often, but these are consignations. So the capacity to save, to make some financial resources safe. And we can choose the objects we decide to fund. If we look at adaptation, we cannot only fund real estate, we also need to work on the ground, on land, on living matters. So this cannot be depreciated, which means we need to finance it and fund it in the long term. So this changes how we look at what we can invest on and how we bring solutions as such, and to finance the human side of things to accompany all of this. We're going to open up the conversation here in Paris, so you know the game. You raise your hand and you can participate. So we have a hand here at the back, and the microphone is going to reach you. Lilou is 16 and she was there earlier on as well. Maybe she's going to say a word in each session. So I am reading what Lilou is saying. Listening to the insurer, when there is a hazard, he can fix the resilient aspect, so it's better, isn't it? Yes, it's more resilient because it's more adapted to climate change, so it's called build back better and build back cheaper. For example, if you have a cost that is 30 to 40% less, then it's more interesting. So microphones are on their way. Raymond is also asking another question. So I'm going to read it. But it's a risk because I haven't read it first. So adaptation works are mostly not profitable, as no one can pay them back, or maybe the future generation, even for a modest amount. For example, 10 billion euros. No banks can finance this works. So maybe it's just a comment more than a question. It is what I was saying, is that the assets have not an account value, so these are investments carried by local authorities or satellite agencies in public spaces, but companies, as it was said this morning, are starting to wonder what to do with their assets and their liabilities. So these are things that we were not looking into before, and they were not funded before. So why, when we talk about nature, for example, because there are other topics, but why do we have a lot of assets and there is no economic model, but we don't ask ourselves the question on whether to finance it or not? You can answer if you want on the chat. Anne, on profitability. It's very difficult to know how to calculate it. If we all renovate our apartments in Paris and we change our car, we will be less sick. And a recent health public study shows that reduction thin air particles leads us to less diseases. It's not good only for the health insurance, but this is at local authority level. There will be savings that will not be taken into account in the business plan of people who renovate their apartments, changing their cars, but at the local authority scale, there will be benefits. So at global level, it's very profitable. But profitability at local level is starting to be quite important, and I think this is what we should work on, is that if they change their behaviors, it's not only to work for the whole planet, but the co-benefits will also help them. So we don't need to think, because I pollute less, my action is not useful, but on automotive congestion, on sinistrality of people who live in internal calendar. So we need to move speeches from global emissions to local effects. So it's easier to see how we can benefit from them. But even decarbonation actions at local level help population.
Just to add something and bring some optimistic touch to what we said, what we can ask ourselves, what are you afraid of in the future? Not to act. And I would say that we have capitals, we have resources, we have funds, everything is known, everything is at our disposal. Not having to proper isolation in some real estate, it's you're losing money, you're losing the value of your real estate. It means that you will have any income. And while the population is aging, I think it's a very important social target. So we have the needs, we have the resources, we have to mobilize this. We talk about 1.5 billion, 1.2 billion. We have the Barnier Fund. What I wanted to add is that the index, and actually the Barnier Fund has not been provisioned even more, so we need to have more. Maybe we can use to have a better understanding of the funds flow, where they go. Another, someone raised their hands. There's someone at the back of the room. You have a microphone. That's amazing. Thank you very much. My name is Sophie Cain for the Federation of Public Works, and I have the first question for Mr. Bourgeois. The insurance companies are based on the individual compensations, but you can see that the adaptation plans should be based on collective prevention. And we see that even though the argument of the insurance companies, they focus more on having the prevention, an individual prevention, but actually the room for maneuver is quite limited. For example, floods. Unless you don't buy in easily floodable area, or if you have the kitchen on the first floor, so you prevent them from being flooded, we know that the levers is based on prevention locally, and we know that in such a context where the floods will multiply in the future, and we know the prevention plans are based on photos taken in the past and not on the forecasts for the future. And my question is, how can insurance companies integrate these prevention measures on the national level? Do you think that insurance companies will look at public policies as developed by local authorities and understand the efficiencies in order to understand how they must cover the risks? Maybe it's not a great idea that the entities that don't invest that much will be covered as well as the good entities. So you have two questions. Yeah, that was the first question out of two. All right, okay, that was the very first question about insurances. Secondly, you talk about funding, yet you mentioned the badly isolated homes, and you know that we have regulations on this, but there's another logic. It's about responsibility, political responsibility, but also civil responsibility, and also criminal responsibility. You know that since the contamination of oysters in the Arc-en-Ciel regions, the water treatment managers are being sued for a lack of maintenance. And I think this idea of having this concept of responsibility will keep on increasing and become even more important. And I think that behind this, there's a question of can we insure this infrastructure? We need to make sure that they are compliant or not. Thank you, madam. They're very long questions. Blaise, maybe you will get some help from Laurence. I think you have to turn your microphone on. Blaise? Yeah, please answer the question. That's all right. Okay. First of all, a disclaimer. I'm not the spokesperson of France Assurance. I'm just a representative of one entity, member of the network. So it's important to think of the clients, but also to think about the entities, the local authorities. Regarding the civil responsibility, civil liability of these companies is something we noted, and this is why we want to support these local authorities in order for them to become resilient. Because obviously, as insurers, we may have to pay for the disasters we cover. So we need to have a holistic approach, a comprehensive approach. As we said, we need to have individual measures, individual approach by having a good knowledge of risks, good implementation of preventive measures, and we need to have well-targeted good study of soil. And it's important, for example, to have to remove the trees around your land, maybe to open doors, maybe, or to prevent floods. And you understand that while we want to have recovery of activities after a disaster, we need to work together. We need to work with partners like Belfort, so we can actually they recover as soon as possible, so we don't have an interruption in your activities. We may have a cost for the insurer and for the company. We also support our clients so they can get access to public funds which exist. And the good thing is that we have the necessary tools. We have the Barnier Fund, so we can fund relocation, but we also have adaptation to prevent floods. And we, as insurers, we have a national network. We can make things easier for everyone, not only for local authorities, but also for clients, our clients. So we can go faster. Another thing we can do is that a good understanding and to raise awareness among the municipalities, because not only 1/3 of the municipalities have an adequate adaptation and prevention plan for natural disasters. It's important to have good knowledge of the territories and the regions. We understand which areas are exposed and how can they benefit from funds. public funds because we pay for these public funds, and obviously we can have tax incentives, like we consider insurance to be a good way to bring new behaviors, and taxes can do literally the same thing. We have a bill being voted with the Renov bonus, which could be very helpful, and so we can go in the right direction. You can increase the climatic resilience of pretty much everyone. Thank you, Blaise. As do you want to add something, Florence? Anyone? No? All right. We agree on this? All right. So we can maybe another hand. And we have a question from Emma watching us online. And then we will go to you, sir. How can we make sure that the adaptation funds will not have an impact on the mitigation funds? Who's in charge of answering this question? Anne, maybe? Yes, I have an answer. Not really. When we refurbish a home and we only focus on thermal isolation, it's not very cost efficient. But if we want to make sure that we can refurbish and to make sure that we can cope with the heat in summer and the cold in winter, at the margin, it doesn't cost much to consider the reduction of CO2 emissions at the same time and refurbishing to mitigate the costs. And if we want to do both things separately, we can pay actually more than doing them at the same time. So in that sense, in this configuration, there's no real dilemma. It's not about mitigating or refurbishing. We'll actually do both things at the same time, and the marginal cost will be not too high. Thank you. And ÉPAULARD, Mr., you had a question. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the presentation. My name is Vincent Pircher, and I'm a member of Météo and Climat, and I've worked at Météo France, and then I worked at the Ministry of Ecological Transition on Earth observation. And I have two questions. The first one is based on what you said about decarbonation studies in specific towns, cities, and regions. Did you consider all the aspects of decarbonation or only some elements of decarbonation? And the second question has to do with long-term funding. We get the feeling that in terms of adaptation, we will see costs will be much higher in the second half of the century. And what are the problems while preparing this in terms of mechanism? Do we need to have new mechanisms, financial mechanisms? And secondly, so in this context, how do you see the distribution of the financial burden with the governments, the national, local, and even the international level? Thank you. Thank you for these two questions. The question about all the dimensions of carbon footprint have been fully considered. We considered scope 1, scope 2. We didn't consider scope 3. So all the carbon emitted in the city and all the carbon produced to produce the power used in the city itself. So it means that if we have scope 3, it means that we need to include everything related to the raw material, everything. It hasn't been considered. And so we considered scopes 1 and 2, and we are at 2.4. I can't remember the metric, but 2.4. You can correct numbers in the report. millions of tons. And we reach 0.4 by 2050, which is in line with the Zen objective, because part of it will be absorbed, but the scope number 3 is not included. Thank you, Anne-Paula. Maybe Laurence, you maybe can tell us more about the potential financial mechanisms and financial schemes needed to get ready on the long term, and the distribution of responsibilities. Okay. Okay, the first topic, as my colleague said, we need to mention adaptation any time we can. So it's not the opposite. We need to include adaptation. So let's go back to pluriannual investment plans. We have costs and we have investments generating revenues, and some investments generate savings, saved costs like isolation, and we need to prevent, we need to protect the territory, and we need to invest in a certain order. And instead of starting with the projects will generate most savings, but we do the other way around. We may have smaller room for maneuver. So the idea is that we need to focus on what we're facing now and how we can define good priorities while funding projects, so we don't reduce our capacities to act in the future. Obviously, we will have innovative markets, bond markets, etc. And we have to think about investing wisely. We're not mature yet, because one investment is one saved cost. It's not based on the profitability of capitals. But we know that it may have an impact, it may prevent us from investing. So we need to have financial mechanisms. I didn't answer the whole question, but something we didn't mention, another thing that we can see every day, we now have European funds to fund adaptation, and most local authorities and regions are not aware of this, and these subsidies, local subsidies, national subsidies won't be enough. We have European funds. It has to do with European sovereignty. I don't know on the international level, but I think it would be interesting maybe to look at a mix of potential European funds, international funds, and it's debt, but debt to fund resilience. And it goes back to how we support these municipalities so they can get access to all the potential help. The fact that you want to know all the options before even drafting a project may lead to of not having the good way to consider what's possible. You need to stay focused. And the final question, a very short one. And I started with a short question for a short answer. Let's finish with a very short question, very short to ask, but you will be in charge of answering the question. If you could make sure that one action, prevention, what would it be? If you could, tomorrow, you can make sure that one specific action will be mandatory for everyone, for a good prevention. But for me, I would start in simplify the bureaucracy and the red tape to get access to the funds. Only 1/4 of all municipalities have access to these funds. Only 6% of the Banque funds are paid to these entities because the red tape is so huge that it's very difficult to get access to these funds. With to upscale these, what we do, the prevention measures. I'm talking about France, Paris 50 degrees, and all the campaigns, and we need to have a good implementation because I'm convinced that it's important to focus on emotion. When you are feeling emotionally linked to what's happening, this is the engine of how we can move forward. Maybe not something mandatory, but it's important to have a good example. When you have a solution that works well, we need to talk about them, to show them. And it's not that stressful when you have a good example of something that works. Everything's possible. And we are kind of all anxious, maybe for not good reason. Because if we don't do anything at all, it could be, you can be worried, but you shouldn't be anxious. If you have an action that we need to implement, it should be mandatory. So look at the potential actions, how we can see the now and the here. And we need to go back to why we're working and for whom. Thank you. Thank you for this discussion, and thanks to this multifaceted approach. It's not about finding money. It's also about understanding and explaining what we want to fund, what we want to support. But it also helps us to redefining what is useful, what is a good priority. But at the end of the day, it's not having any remorse, because 2100 is tomorrow. Thank you very much for your discussion. So now we'll have lunch. And we'll meet again at 2:30, and we'll talk about concrete feedback. A lot of great things are taking place, and we'll talk about this at 2:30. Thank you, and see you soon.